Good evening, everyone. I, Atul Tripathi, on behalf of Seminar Committee of Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia, National Law University, would like to welcome you all for the today's session on the topic Transparency in Democracy and Political Funding. Firstly, I would like to take the opportunity to thank Association for Democratic Reforms for collaborating with us. Association for Democratic Reform is a citizen-led, non-political and non-governmental organization which has been working for around 20 years with the objective of bringing electoral and political reform so as to improve democracy and governance in India. Today we have Dr. S.Y. Quraishi and Major General Retired Anil Verma as the speaker for the session. Our first speaker will be Dr. S.Y. Quraishi. He is an IAS officer of 1971 batch from Haryana Cadre and had served as the 17th Election Commissioner of India from 2010 to 2012. I welcome you, sir. Our second speaker is Major General Anil Verma. He has been retired after 37 years of the distinguished service in the Indian Army and is currently heading the Association for the Democratic Reforms. Welcome, sir.
Thank
All
you.
the participants, please note, floor will be open for the question answer at the end. The participants can put their questions in the chat box. If the question is directed to a particular speaker, I would now invite our chairperson, Dr. Prem Kumar Gautam, to introduce the theme of the session.
Thank you, Atre.
Same.
Good evening, everyone. I welcome to all of you in today's online session. As you know, the theme of the session is electoral reforms in India. When I have gone through this notion of democracy and transparency, I have found that there are so many scholars who are of the view that the presence of election alone is not sufficient for a country to be considered a democratic country, and that transparency must be included as part of the definition of this political regime. And on the other hand, there are also the view of different scholars who were saying that the both transparency and democracy are complicated and multidimensional concepts. So here, maybe there may be a more democracy than the ballot box and the more to transparency than the dissemination of data. Now, in the past few years, discussions on electoral reforms and transparency in democracy have taken many shapes. Supreme Court has also issued certain guidelines and directions for free and fair elections, but still, Indian democracy is facing a lot of challenges from the corrupt practices and criminalization of politics. In this situation, electoral reforms are need of the hour, and I think this will contribute and this will help the citizens to participate in the electoral practices, and this will also strengthening our democracy. Now, in today's online session, our eminent speakers will be discussing and deliberating on these issues. With this, I extend a warm welcome to our guest speaker, Dr. S.Y. Quraishi Sahab and Major General Anil Verma ji. I hope this session will be very fruitful and enlightening for us. Thank you. Over to Atle.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dr. S.Y. Qureshi, to commence the discussion. Sir. I think there is some technical glitch on the part of SY Qureshi sir. Uh, I would like to invite Anil sir for the commencement of the session.
Okay. Uh, okay, Atre, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. So I'll be using this PPT and I'll request whoever is operating it to just keep moving the slides as and when I keep telling you. Okay, so good evening, everybody, to the attendees and the organizers. I'm thankful to the RMLU Law University and Dr. Gautam and the team who have invited me to speak on this topic. It is quite relevant now because 15 September 2020 is the International Democracy Day. And democracy is a huge subject, but we are restricting ourselves to transparency and democracy in the political funding. So before I start with the topic per se, can I have the next slide, please? I'd like to acquaint you all with the uh, role and functioning of the ADR as is laid down here on the slide, because I am assuming that most of the students of law are the attendees here on this webinar today. So some of you may have heard of ADR, some of you may not have. So basically we are working as an NGO, and we are working towards improving governance and the reduction of criminality and money power in the elections. Next, please. Okay, so these are the four verticals that we have, and the work which we do in each is shown there very briefly. You can quickly have a look at that. Okay, next. Yeah, so basically this is how I'm going to cover the presentation. I would like to spend about 5-7 minutes on part one on transparency in democracy, and then I'll move to transparency in political funding, which I'll discuss in substantial amount of detail. Next, please. So as I mentioned earlier, next, please. Transparency in democracy, it's a I am going to restrict myself to this, and first let me just speak what exactly do we mean by transparency and openness. I feel openness and transparency are the pillars for democracy, because this is how the people expect that there has to be a free flow of information, there has to be protection of personal data, there has to be freedom of expression and observance of fundamental human rights. It has to be a kind of open government, which is transparent, which is accessible to all the citizens anytime, anywhere, and is also responsive to the needs of the citizens and to new ideas and their demands. Now, how is it possible? The governments have to lead by example. Openness should translate into certain key activities of the government. I'll just quickly mention some of them. For example, integrity in the public procurement system, good budgetary practices, managing the conflict of interest, using public financial management systems. Performance of the government has to be good in the health, education, and other sectors. More and more activities must be done by e-governance, anti-corruption measures, to hold the government officials accountable if they are indulging in corruption, whether they are elected or appointed officials, whatever. Decisions of the government and the public officials must be available for public scrutiny. RTI, you must have heard of the RTI Act. If citizens are to govern their affairs directly or through the elected representatives, they must have access to the information, because the in order to have a choice as to how their affairs are conducted, then there has to be free media. Media, as you know, is called a pillar of the democracy, and it is the guarantor of the public access to the information. Then another important thing is separation of powers. No branch of government should dominate any other branch. And it should have the power to check the abuse of the other branches. Especially in a parliamentary system, this is achieved by having, very strong opposition parties, independent judiciary, public commissions, free press, and so on. Now, if transparency and accountability are absent, government is likely to succumb to corruption and general abuse of power. This has occurred throughout the history. You can pick up any book and you will see that. Especially if there is no control on the leaders and the government action, they will do anything possible to retain power. Therefore, without transparency and accountability, democracy is impossible in capital letters. In their absence, elections and notions of the will of the people lose their meaning, and governments have the potential to become arbitrary and self-serving. So overall, I would say there is no doubt that democracy is better than dictatorship because of the checks and balances that we have, the free media, the human rights which are permitted, and so on. So before I go further, let us do a quick check on how and where does India stand. We are one of the largest democracies existing in the world. There is a thing called democracy index. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not have. Basically, it is an index which has been generated by the Economic Intelligence Unit. It has 5 broad categories, and there are 165 democracies which are covered by it. Every year it puts out a report. Those 5 parameters which are used is, firstly, the election process and the pluralism, the functioning of the government, the political participation, the democratic political culture, and lastly, civil liberties. So these are given a rating on a scale of 10. If the rating is more than 8, it is a full democracy. If the rating is between 6 and 8 points, it is a flawed democracy. If the rating is between 4 and 6, it is a hybrid democracy. And if the rating is less than 4, it is an authoritarian regime. It is not a democracy. So 45% of the world's population currently is living in full democracies. However, you would have seen that there is a threat to democracy across the world. There are a number of things which have happened in the recent past. For example, the Arab Spring uprising, the countries like China, where the leaders have lifelong, this thing, or North Korea for that matter, if you see. Then you have leaders in these democracies who are populist, who have autocratic tendencies, something like it's happening in Turkey, I would say. And there are so many other places where you've seen, like in Philippines, Brazil, Mexico, and so on. So basically, the democratic institutions are being subverted in these countries. Now, coming to the ranking of this year. First is Norway, second is Iceland, third is Sweden. And amongst the Asia Pacific countries, 8 countries have, I may like to give an interesting thing here. There are 8 countries who have the word Democratic Republic in their title, but they are not fully democratic. You would be curious to know, where does India stand? So out of the 165 countries in 2018, India ranked 41st. Unfortunately, this has dropped now, and we are at 51 now. From 41, a drop of 10 points. We are at 51 now. Earlier, our ranking was, our rating, it is 7.23. Now it has fallen down to 6.40. So why is this decline? basically they also give you reasons, they give you points for each system. So in case of India, it is because of the lessening of the civil society participation, lessening of civil liberties, and the media integrity which is in question. So this is as far as the democratic index goes. Now, how robust is our democracy? Now, like I said, democracy is a very huge subject. We can't cover everything itself, but I believe elections, of course, is one of the most important parts of democracy. And free and fair elections, like the Election Commission of India has been doing over the years, has a very great role to play. But it is not all that is democracy. I would say it constitutes a very important segment. So basically, people feel that the grassroots democracy in our country was introduced after the introduction of the 73 constitutional amendment, when powers were given to the panchayats and the other people. Now, if we come to the political parties and their role, they are the ones who are governing these democracies. They are they have people who are elected and they form governments. But in India, you'll be surprised to know that there is no law governing the political parties. There is hardly any transparency, accountability of the political parties. There is generally no system of election of leaders and all. You are seeing it all happening in front of you. And once these governments are elected at the state level, what is going on? Horse trading is going on. People are being bought and sold. They are being kept in hotels and resorts and moved in buses and aircrafts from one place to other. I mean, what is this going on? Is this the way political parties are supposed to function? A lot of people have issues about the system of this thing which we are following, the first past the post system, in which whoever gets the maximum votes is elected. Some people are against this also, but there are a number of systems which are being followed in different countries. ADR generally advocates for the the proportional representation system. Then parliament. Parliament is a very important element of the democracy. And what is happening? Parliament is not functioning half the time. The opposition and the leaders of the opposition give a statement that we will not let the parliament run. And it is happening like that. So what does that say for our democracy? So these disruptions, this removal of the questionnaire and all, are these good indicators? The other important institutions which are there, which are the pillars of democracy, are they being run very well? Are we electing or selecting the people who are manning these institutions correctly? Or are they people who are towing the government line? These are all questions, we have to think. Because after all, what are we expecting from democracy? We are expecting good governance. We are expecting that the poor man's, this thing interest is also being catered for. How is it that there is concentration of wealth in the top 1%? Do you know that in the number of billionaires which are there in the world, the maximum are in China, the second are in India, in USA, and guess who's third? Third is India. During this lockdown, this COVID pandemic and all, who's benefiting? It is the corporates and these big people, industrialists, where millions of jobs have been lost and unemployment is at the top. So these are, some of the issues I have raised. Now I'll move to the part 2. The questions can be kept for the end, please. Okay, move to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, next, please. Okay, so what are the problematic areas in political finance? I've listed some of them. Dr. Quraishi is there. He can always tell you more than what I will tell you because he's an expert on elections and all this. So basically, there is no denying that political parties needs finance. But the point is how much? In Indian elections, there is no limit. It is going through the roof. We are spending almost, or if not more than what the US elections in the last presidential elections was spent. So how do you provide a level playing field? In our legislatures, around 70 to 80% of the MLAs and MPs are crorpatis. In the current parliament, 85% are crorpatis. In the elections, though the election commission does its best to check the influence of money power, but I feel the distorting effect of money is definitely affecting our democracy. Vote buying, illicit, various things are going on. Thousands and crores of rupees, drugs, and all that is caught every time by the election commission, and it keeps increasing every election that we see. Next, please. Okay, so these are some of the issues, and what are the challenges? So, like I said, ECI, Election Commission of India, has issued very detailed transparency guidelines. But the problem is, it is not. It doesn't have the statutory authority. So half the time, the political parties don't bother to implement it or follow it. Some of the other points I have listed here, I will cover anonymous electoral bonds in greater detail because that is the most important thing as far as public funding, political party funding that has happened in the last couple of years. And I would like to highlight that as per our report, 67% of the funding of national parties is from unknown sources. And we have this limit of 20,000 rupees and above only, which the political parties are supposed to show officially. So below that, how much they get, I would like to give you an interesting fact that there is one political party called BSP, which for the last so many years, at least 12 years or so that I have seen, they say we haven't got any donations below 20,000. Oh, sorry, above 20,000. They say all our donations are below 20,000. So they don't submit any reports and all. Okay, next. These are some of the slides which I am going to quickly run through, where I am showing you, where do these national parties get their funds and what is the amount that they have been receiving. Now, the slide is a bit small. I don't know how clearly you can see it or not, but the fact is you can see that the leftmost tallest bar is of BJP. It is, much more than any other political party. And it has increased many folds. You can have a look at what the other parties are receiving. Next slide, please. Okay, here I am showing you the breakdown as to where is this funding coming from. I have used different color codes. I want to highlight the fact of the amount of money that they are getting through electoral bonds. Because electoral bonds, some of you may have heard of it, but the basic thing is that we do not know who is the donor. So there is your transparency. Where is the transparency in this? You can see huge amounts of money are coming through electoral bonds. Okay, next. Next, please. Yeah, this is again the sources of income. Like I told you, around 67%, the biggest chunk of the pie is from unknown sources. Known sources is 25%, other sources 7 point some percent. So basically, this is the state of transparency. Next, please. Okay. So this I'm trying to tell you the corporates, how much they are contributing to the national parties. So if you see, it is increasing constantly and the amounts are pretty huge. Okay, next please. Year-wise corporate donations. So here you can see the year-wise corporate donations between 2012-13 to 2017-18. Again, you will see there is a quite an increase. The Why the bar chart is taller in 2014-15 and 16, 17, 17, 18 is because the general elections were held after that. You will always find a peak in donations to the political parties just before the parliament or the general elections. Next slide, please. Okay, here I have done a breakdown and try to show you, the corporate donations on the left side, which party is getting how much, and on the right side, I am showing you what is the source. So the electoral trusts, the red bar on the right chart, the maximum amount is through electoral trust, then is through manufacturing, then real estate, then mining, and then trusts and groups of countries. So this is the breakdown as to how these parties, the national parties, are getting the money from. Where is it coming from? Next, please. Okay. Now, like I told you, donations through electoral bonds, which are anonymous. This is important because this has beaten all records of contribution now because the donors are anonymous. They are happy. Political parties are happy. So you can see the huge amounts that have been donated. And I don't have to emphasize, BJP is leading in this. Okay, next, please. So, in this one, again, I can't see the heading, but basically, yeah. So, one is that, like I mentioned earlier, there is no law regulating the political parties. ADR had filed a petition with the Information Commission, and finally in 2013, the Chief Information Commissioner's full bench gave an order that the national political parties will come under the RTA Act. None of the political parties followed that. So we filed a petition in the Supreme Court. There has been no hearing for last so many years. So this is how the thing is. The other details are there. They never submit their audit reports in time to the Election Commission. Whatever is submitted is also half-hearted type, everybody follows their own thing. Even though the Election Commission, after consultation with the Institute of Chartered Accountants, laid down a system and a method as to how these should be put out, but still there are a lot of lacunas. You can see the ADR reports and you'll find the details. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so please click one by one. Click on the first slide. Hello. Okay, basically here I was trying to tell you, I think there's some issue with these slides. You're not able to show. They are those ones which move one after the other. I was showing the PILs which are being conducted, being pursued by ADR. One is on electoral bonds. One is that there should be a limit on the amount which the political parties can spend. As you are aware, the candidates, when they contest elections, there is a limit on the amount which they can spend. In the state elections, it is 28 lakhs. In the smaller states, it is a little lesser. For the general elections, it is 70 lakhs that the candidate can spend. But there is no limit on the amount which the political parties can spend. So we had filed a petition against that. This disproportionate assets case mandated to, this is a good thing which has happened. Now not only their own income, they have to give the details of their dependents, their spouses, and not only for 1 year, now they have to give it for 5 years. Then there was a PIL on the amendment of the FCRA Act. That is a very interesting one. I'll take a minute on that. BJP and Congress were found guilty of receiving foreign funding as per the Delhi High Court based on a PIL which ADR had filed. Now they could not get out of it. So they of course fought it in the court, and then it went to Supreme Court where it was still going on. There have been no hearings as always for our matters for the last so many years. But what they did was that since they were in the corner, they amended the FCRA Act with retrospective effect. So you are law students, you would be aware that the FCRA Act 1976 was the one under which they were found guilty. And in 2010, the FCRA was replaced by the new act. Now, so they did not know what to do, so they have amended everything. All the Income Tax Act, the RBI Act, and various other acts have been amended to make sure that Congress and BJP escape from this. But the matter is not over, it is still continuing in the court. Okay, let's move to the next one. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, what is the need for transparency in political finance? It's quite obvious. First is there has to be equal footing. The UN HRC General Council has also stated there. I have given you this. The 255th Law Commission report very clearly says that there is a need to reduce black money. Then what does it generate? It generates institutional corruption. And so it is against the participation, women and other marginalized groups, because they don't have funds, so they just can't participate in the electoral process. You will find, I did a study once, and 75% of the women who are MLAs or MPs are from dynastic backgrounds, because they have the money and they have the backing. Common person can't fight elections. Next, please. So what is the way forward? I have broken this into three. The first is transparency and disclosure. So first is bring the political parties under RTI, abolish cash donations, disclose names, addresses, PAN details of donors, even for amounts less than 20,000. Electoral trust companies scheme should be amended. Why I am saying this is because there are 6 or 7 electoral trusts who are still not governed by the Election Commission's mandate. Sources of funds about 20,000 during elections must be reported as part of the election expenditure statement. Now people say, how do we do this? So one of the methods recommended is state funding. But ADR says that if state funding is to be adopted, it must be preceded by other reforms like decriminalization of politics, inner party democracy, electoral finance reform, transparency and accountability in political party funding. Next, please. Next slide. Okay, ensuring compliance and accountability. So there has to be a law regulating the political parties. As I mentioned, there is none. There has to be a strict fine for non-compliance. There has to be derecognition. You will be aware that the Election Commission doesn't have power to derecognize a party. That is why we have some 25 or 2600 parties registered with the Election Commission, out of which just about 22 or 23% contest elections. What are the rest for? Just making black money white. Electoral trust, like I said, those who don't submit these reports, they must not be entitled to tax exemption. You must be aware that all political parties' donations, as long as they submit the report to the Election Commission, is entitled to 100% tax exemption. So how do you do that? One is, last point, empowering the ECI. There has to be power given to the ECI to derecognize political parties and impose strict penalties for non-compliance. The transparency guidelines of the Election Commission need to be given statutory backing. And scrutiny of financial documents submitted by the parties must be conducted seriously by a body approved by CAG and ECI. The CBDT, this Income Tax Authority, they do something. The Election Commission does send certain things to them, but we don't get to know, because when we file RTIs, they say this is in the fiduciary capacity and all that, and RTIs are turned down. Okay, so this is all that I had to say. Maybe I have taken a little bit of extra time. If there are any questions at the end of the thing, we'll take them on. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to invite Dr. S.Y. Quraishi to continue the discourse. Sir,
Can you hear me?
sir, your voice is breaking a little bit. I think there is some problem with.
What can I afraid question answer session?
Sir, you are not audible.
Please.
I think there is some technical issue with Qureshi sir. Uh, Anil sir, would you like to speak on any topic further, or we would take question?
No,
Pardon, sir.
I can take question now.
Okay. The floor is open for the question. Anybody?
I suggest you can read the chat questions, whoever the moderator is, and I can answer.
Okay, sir. So there is the question from Santosh Rathod. Uh, what is the rule for the national level political parties submit their annual audit report to state election commission? Sorry.
Okay, so Santosh Singh Rathore, basically the national level political parties do not submit their reports to the state election commissioner. Let me tell you, there is a difference between the state election commissioner and the election commission of India. Election commission of India have their representatives who are called CEOs, chief electoral officers in each state. Okay, they are generally IAS officers only. They are the ones responsible for conducting the elections in the state. The mandate of Election Commission of India is to conduct the Rajya Sabha, the Lok Sabha, the state assembly elections. The mandate of the state election commissioner, who is appointed by the state government, is generally a retired person. It's a bureaucrat generally, is to conduct the local body elections, panchayat, zilla parishad, and so, municipal corporation, and so forth. Okay. So please understand that first. So as far as the national level political parties annual audit report, it is submitted to the Election Commission of India. Okay, it is supposed to be done every year. But the problem is, like I mentioned, even if they don't submit it, nothing much happens. Actually, if they don't submit and if they do, you pick up any of our reports on this in the ADR website, you will find that there is a delay of 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, even 1 year at times when the parties are submitting it late. But nothing happens. Actually, they should be punished. What should be the punishment? Like I told you, as per the law, political parties only have to submit their audit reports to claim 100% tax exemption. So there should be a law wherein if they don't submit their audit report in time, okay, 1 month, 2 months delay, 3 months delay, but if they still don't submit it, then they should be penalized by what? They should be taxed for that amount of political funding which they have received. Okay.
There is another question from Asta Shivare. So, what is the power election commission have if any party does not comply to the instructions?
I have already covered this in the first part. Like if they don't submit the detail, nothing much happens. Uh, that is what I am saying, that we need to have stricter laws. More power needs to be given to the Election Commission of India to impose penalties on the parties. Okay, any other questions? I don't see any other chats. Can't you get Professor Dr. Quraishi on the phone or something? Not possible? If it's just his video is not available, at least he can speak, no?
Yes, sir.
Is that?
Let me ask. Let me ask to the committee members.
Yeah. I think I got a chat that they are trying.
Meanwhile, there is another question from Yakub. Uh,
Okay.
so, Election Commission has been entrusted with a constitutional duty to conduct free and fair elections. Commission has been failed to prevent the use of black money in election. What do you think Commission could have done to prevent it?
See, the Election Commission has done a lot they have various systems of doing it. One is that during the election, there is an elaborate system of, they have these flying squads, they have these examiners, they are groups of people, officials of Election Commission who are monitoring on a day-to-day basis how much money is being spent by a candidate, how much money is being spent by the political party. But in spite of that, there is a lot of corruption and lot of, it is like a cat and mouse game between the Election Commission and the candidates and the political parties. They try their best to spend as much money as they can, and actually the amount of money, black money, which is spent in the election is one of the most serious things which is affecting our clean electoral system. It is not that the Election Commission is not trying, they are trying, but they are not fully successful in preventing the use of black money in the elections. Now, if you have seen these statistics which I have given you of the amount of funding and all, this is declared funding by the political party. What is not declared, that below 20,000 rupees donations is a huge amount. We don't know how much of that is, and since that is cash, it is black money. Now the government claims that by introduction of electoral bonds, because the thing is through the banks and the KYC is there, and also they are trying to reduce the black money. But unfortunately, we don't agree with that. It's not so, because there are so many shell companies. You know how the money can be routed from our country to some other country, and it can come back, and it can all be done through the banks, but that is black money. So the more needs to be done. I would say more needs to be done.
So one more question from Aniket Sachan. According to you, what is the new amendment or provision that should be added in Representation of Public Act?
I would recommend that as law students, you read the recommendations of the Election Commission of India to the Government of India. There are a large number of recommendations. I think it's running into 16, 17 pages or 60 pages, I think. The last recommendation which have been sent. And very regularly, the Election Commission of India keeps giving these recommendations to the government, to the Law Commission. You see, Law Commission is, or for that matter, even if you read this 255th Law Commission report or the 170th Law Commission reports, there are so many recommendations which they have given, which need to be incorporated in the Representation of People Act. There are a whole lot of them. As far as ADR is concerned, our thrust, like I told you, is against criminality and, or I would use the word money power and muscle power. I didn't mention it there, but the number of criminal people with criminal cases in the parliament, it is right now at 39%. Before that parliament, 5 years back, it was 34%. Before that, it was 29%. So every 5 years, the number of people with criminal cases are becoming MPs and MLAs. It is rising every year by 3 to 4 to 5%. Is that good for the democracy? There are so many PILs which have been filed by different people and also ADR that people with criminal backgrounds should not be given tickets. They should not be allowed to contest. There are fast track courts which have been established for taking action against the MLAs and MPs. But nobody knows how many of those cases have been solved, what is happening, and all that. So there are large number of recommendations, but the unfortunate thing in our country is that they are not acted upon. There are so many committee reports which are lying in the dustbin. Goswami committee report, Vora committee report, there are so many of them.
Any more question, please?
Okay,
So I think that's it. Yes,
yeah.
sir.
We're not able to get Dr. Quraishi.
No, sir. I think there is some technical problem on his side. Network issue. He joined with some network issue. So thank you, sir, for the session. It was, though it was unfortunate that sir has not been able to join, but we are lucky to have you. It was a wonderful opportunity to have you and listen to you on such an important issue. As being the world's largest democracy, our goal is to become world's cleanest democracy. Not only as a law student or researcher, but as a citizen of India, we have a responsibility for bringing transparency and accountability in the political process of the country. As the motto of the Association for Democratic Reforms, while quoting Felix Frankfurt, states that no office in this land is more important than that of being a citizen. So I thank the speaker, our chairperson, and all the participants for joining us for the session today. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Those who wish to take this PPT, they are welcome. You can share it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you.